Hello and welcome to Conversations in Sustainability, your regular bite-sized journey into the world of sustainability. Today we are pulling on the waders, we're downing the seasickness pills because this episode is all about sustainable seafood. I'm lucky enough to be joined by the very knowledgeable Alex Webb, Senior Communications and Marketing Manager for the Marine Stewardship Council. Welcome, Alex.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So let's start at the very basics. Sustainable seafood, what do we actually mean? Is this about the amount of fish we take? Is it the way we fish? Are there good fish? Are there bad fish? What are we talking about here?
Well, firstly, most of us can agree we want more fish and less plastic in the sea, and fish need to swim around, grow, reproduce, and sustainable fishing basically allows that to happen. And so at the Marine Stewardship Council, we set the world's leading standard for sustainable fishing, which has three main principles. Firstly, that there is enough fish left in the sea. Secondly, that the ecosystem is maintained, so bycatch is minimized. And then thirdly, that there's effective and good management in place, things like complying with all rules, regulations, laws, good staff training, data collection, etc. So we've defined it in like a 200-page book, but if you are a consumer, you just need to look for a blue fish tick label on products, and that can give you the assurance that it has come from a sustainable fishery.
Excellent. So we'll tackle the labelling side of things because I know that's a big focus for you guys. But does local sourcing come into that? So we sort of typically with the food we think about local is good. Is that a factor for seafood?
So really there's a lot of different factors and considerations when shopping for seafood, and there's a lot of personal preferences. And so we have a standard that looks at the environmental impact of sustainable seafood production. In terms of local, you could say, well, actually, there's local knowledge, there's a short supply chain, so you perhaps have a bit more certainty that that fish that you're buying is in fact the fish from your local fishery. So often it's about personal preference, but what I would say is that no matter where your seafood comes from, whether it's tuna from the Western Central Pacific Ocean, or it's hoki from New Zealand, or it's Alaskan salmon, we're a nation of seafood lovers with a broad cultural palette, and really it's about how was that fish caught, how did it get there, and looking for a label, like a credible label, can be one way to provide that shortcut, because we know that people care about where their food comes from, and there's high levels of concern about the ocean and the environment. But there's also a lot of clutter, confusion, lots of mixed messages out there.
Absolutely. So we're seafood lovers, but are we sustainable seafood lovers? How good are we at this? Are we sort of above par internationally, or are we there's a lot to do?
So we all can play a role. We have a theory of change, and whether you're government setting regulation, quotas, or whether you are a brand retailer with your sourcing policies, or a consumer shopping around and being conscious about what you're buying, we can all play a role for sure. We know from our research that Australians really do care about overfishing and the environment, and they really want to take action and do the right thing. But I would say there's quite a big gap between intent and action. So is there sustainable seafood that you can clearly identify available in your local shop? Is it at the right price? Is it the species that you like to eat? So many different factors at play. So I think we can always be doing more, but it's definitely something we can all play a part in.
And you touched earlier a little bit about supply chains, and I imagine this is a huge issue, traceability. Like, how do we know what the seafood we're eating is what it purports to be? Is this I read fish fraud's an issue. Is this something you guys work with?
So it is a big challenge, and globally, a study of studies showed that about 30% of all seafood sold out there is mislabeled and misdescribed, and there's two
Intentionally, or
well, there's two main reasons. Either intentionally for profit, and we've all been to a restaurant that says at the bottom of the menu, all our fish is local and sustainable. They could be selling you a cheaper farmed salmon, but putting on the menu that it's a wild Atlantic salmon. So when there are two pieces of fish that look almost identical, it can be done intentionally, but it can also be done by mistake. So seafood goes on quite a journey around the world. It often is caught somewhere and then shipped off elsewhere to be processed and packed. And along the way, fish can be mixed up, and that can have health implications. It can also cover up illegal fishing or overfishing. So there are many issues with seafood fraud. And that is why when you buy seafood with our label, you can be sure it comes from a certified sustainable fishery, because every single part of the supply chain has what we call chain of custody. And we also do DNA testing to verify that it all works.
how does that work?
So there's what's called barcode tracing. So we take samples from around the world of MSC labeled product, and then we use the DNA barcode testing to verify that it is the correct subspecies. And every time we've done this experiment, we find that over 99% of cases, what's in the packet is what it says it is. And where it hasn't been the case, on the one or two occasions we've launched an investigation. One time it was labelled as North Sole instead of South Sole, something like that. So there was an issue with how it was described, but
overwhelmingly good results.
Overwhelmingly, yes. And it's actually a really simple process. It's not rocket science. It's just a case of, well, if you're handling certified seafood that's MSC, you keep it marked as MSC. Maybe it's in a different shelf of the fridge, or it's in a different container. There's a paper trail. You're getting it from a certified supplier. So it's a one up, one down.
The systems, the governance, the processes, basically. Okay. So if you're going to distill down, like, what's the big issue that your industry's trying to tackle? Like, if they really put the real problem spotlight on it, what would you say is the biggest one?
That's a tough question, because there are multiple challenges in my field. In communications, I would say high levels of concern mixed with clutter and confusion is a major challenge. There are so many labels and claims out there. People really do want to do the right thing, and also don't want to go shopping and feel guilty, and don't have to choose between sustainable and I don't know. So that for me. But if you were to ask me about the fishing industry more broadly, then climate change. Fish don't have passports. They don't respect national boundaries. So they're going to swim where waters are cooling and changing. And so that's a major challenge, but so is deglobalization and lack of cooperation between different nation states who can't agree on quota sharing, or who might go into other countries' waters to fish illegally.
Examples of that?
I don't have specific examples. I wouldn't want to implicate anyone in particular, but
fair enough.
It does happen. There are other organizations around, like the Global Fishing Watch, who are funded by Google and Leonardo DiCaprio, and they use satellite technology to track movements of fishing vessels, and using AI and big data to predict illegal fishing patterns. So we are one of many organizations working to tackle the many problems facing the ocean, from overfishing, pollution, and climate change. And then I suppose the final one is harmful subsidies. Many governments subsidize fishing, and that can lead to an oversupply and overfishing situation as well. So quite a lot of different issues on multiple fronts. So
let's take a deep dive into the one you're closest to. So what sort of, greenwashing, huge issue for the wider sustainability issue in industry. But what sort of claims are you seeing when you're in the supermarket? What sort of labeling, sort of trust marks, false claims? What are we? What's the average consumer up against?
So when you go into the shops, and I did this little experiment, and I thought, okay, I'm going to buy a can of tuna. It's really easy to compare virtually within a second the price. That's $1, that's $2. It's really easy to see which brand is which, what flavor. Is it in olive oil or sweet chili? It's quite
Spring
quick
water,
and easy.
yeah.
But when it comes to environmental claims, I counted on just canned tuna over 11 different claims.
11, okay.
Anything from fad-free. Well, what
is
is a
that?
fad? I could tell you what a fad is, but do people know what that means?
I'm looking at the producer, Alex. Do you know what a fad is? No, there's a head shake. What? Can we have a concise fad summary?
Sure. So, fad is fish aggregating device, and the quickest definition of it is it's a floating object on the water that casts a shadow, and that fish congregate underneath that shadow. And then it makes the fishing easier because they can scoop up all that fish more efficiently. It has challenges because that means you could also catch unwanted species such as turtles and other marine mammals as well. So, yeah, that's what fad free means, or fad fishing. So, I also saw things like responsibly sourced, commitment to sustainability, sustainably sourced, sustainable fishing practices, X, Y, and Z.
Broad kind of claim.
Yeah, and I think that's really the issue. There's no real standardization, and so it's very difficult for customers who, honestly, we want to get in and out the shops as quick as possible. You might have the kid nipping at your heel in aisle number 3, and you don't want to hang around. So we're not getting guides out of our phone. We're not scanning QR codes in the shop. So we really need to be able to make that judgment call quite quick and easy. And at the moment, it's not.
So, solution going forward, what do we think we need to do to fix this?
Well, we've been contributing to inquiries into greenwashing in the US, the UK, the EU, and here in Australia. And the ACCC has released guidance, 8 principles for communicating environmental claims in a credible way. And that guidance is really useful. And so I guess one obvious thing for brands and retailers would be to follow that guidance and ultimately stop using blanket claims. Stop using claims that just say eco-friendly or ocean-friendly or we have a commitment to this. It needs to be specific. It needs to be backed up with evidence. It needs to be verified by a third party. It needs to have further information available. And it needs to be visible and simple and backed up with some form of education as well. So I would say the ACCC guidance is a great starting point.
Yeah. And do you offer resources for businesses? Is that something that the MSC tackles?
Yeah. So when you are, let's say, a brand or retailer and you decide to get your products certified and sourced from a certified source, then you're able to use our eco-label and claim. And we have a process of checking and verifying any marketing materials, all the packaging design, etc. So we provide that service to brands and retailers, and we charge a royalty fee for the use of our label, which in turn helps us to outreach to more fisheries. And that's part of the theory of change that we have to really transform the fishing industry to a sustainable basis globally.
So we've talked about DNA testing. We've mentioned AI. It sounds like there's a lot of innovation in tech and science in this space. Are there any other examples of interesting stuff coming through? Is the industry changing?
I would say the industry is that we work with, and of course we work with forward-thinking brands, retailers, and fishing companies who are certified. So probably the best of the best. And, you know, the fishing industry that we work with, they're really keen to tell their story. I would say they perhaps feel under scrutiny a lot. It's a highly regulated industry, and in many places in the world, a highly politicized industry as well. And so I think, the fishing industry really are keen to dispel myths out there, myths such as all big boats are bad,
Okay.
or all trawling is bad, or
Yes.
this particular species you should not eat. All these sort of really blanket, overly simplified messages that consumers are hit with through the media. So I would say they are doing a lot, they're innovating, and in order to achieve our standard, often fisheries need to make improvements to achieve it. And then because we update and raise the bar of our standard every 5 years, they need to make further improvement to maintain
So it's
and
not a
renew their
set and forget. They've
certification.
constantly got to be updating.
Absolutely, yeah. And once you have a certificate, it lasts 5 years, but it's subject to annual surveillance audits. So you might pass with a few conditions. You've got a year to close the gap and close out those conditions and improve. If not, your certificate is suspended, and then every year audits are checking that you're still doing the right thing. Plus, if any evidence were to come to light or any accusation were made by a stakeholder group at any time, that can trigger an expedited audit. So lots of safeguards in place in the
Yeah.
system, but it's all about continuous improvement.
So just to round it out, back to the consumers, what's the takeaway? So we should be looking for the blue tick, but what else can we be doing to be sustainable seafood consumers?
I would say, of course, look for the blue fish tick, ask questions if there isn't one available, but also try and reduce food waste. The
Yeah.
United Nations, they release a severe report every 2 years. The next one's due out around World Ocean Day, June 8th. And they estimate that in the Oceania region, 50% of all fish caught is wasted by the consumption stage.
Really?
And that would include all of the offcuts that are then,
Yeah.
chopped off and thrown away. But certainly, I think, with fish, we can be a little bit funny about fish. We're a bit, ooh, it's one day past its sell by date. I don't want to risk it, etc. So I think if we can make sure that we're eating all the fish that we buy, that we
Yeah.
buy what we need, then that can help. But also, many people are switching away from red meat to fish, and the top reason is price, followed by health concerns,
Well,
and then followed by environmental concern. So you might be making the odd edit in your weekly repertoire of what you cook and switching away from red meat, which has a much higher carbon emission, to sustainable fish, which in theory is a renewable organic food source. You need to make it simple, easy, mainstream, frame it with a what's in it for me benefit. We can be really altruistic and have beautiful imagery with bubbles and dolphins jumping in the air and rainbows and all sorts, but ultimately people are looking for fish that's at a decent price, tastes great, it's healthy,
Yeah.
and so therefore sustainability is a satisfaction driver, not necessarily a purchase driver. It's a feel-good factor. So it's that framing of good for you and the ocean too, for example,
Yeah.
delivering that side order of sustainability rather than making it the main course.
Well, that is all we have time for today. So I'm going to say a big thank you to Alex for joining us and sharing all your wisdom. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Conversations in Sustainability, a podcast by the Green Horizon team. We're specialists in sustainability communications, from the circular economy to the energy transition and food waste to electric vehicles. We live and breathe these issues day in, day out. To check out our work and hear from some of our clients, head to greenhorizon.au.